Radio check. Loud and clear.
KSL Sports and KSL Podcast present Mode Push, an American view of F1, starting now.
One stop. Here's what you get with this. Honestly,
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted.
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. It is another edition of Mode Push, KSL Sports, KSL Podcast, and I'm Alex Kirry. Dan Jimenez, of course, is always with me here. Dan, man, just even the week between races is too much. I can't stand it. All this waiting. I know they got to get a bunch of cars across the entire freaking world, but, man, what about me and what I get to do on the weekends?
Yeah, hurry up. I mean,
Jeez.
I need my dopamine hit.
Now, I've got a couple things to bring up because obviously going to Australia, there are a bunch of storylines in here. And if you're Lewis Hamilton, the play that you make now is that, you know, you have this mix of I trust my team, but my team hasn't gotten it right. But also, boy, what a victim I am because I just don't have a great car underneath me right now. So there's a sandbagging element. I want to start out with your guys at Mercedes and what they're going to do over, I don't know, is there a chance that they win races this year? Is there a chance that they finish outside the top three this year? Tell me where this Mercedes-AMG team is.
I would say there is a chance they win a race this year, but we're not really going to know until they bring their new updates. And I saw a quote today, or an article about Toto saying that they're targeting to bring their complete new package that is, you know, the new direction and design at the Romana, the other Italian Grand Prix, not Monza, but
not
the
Monza,
other one.
but the Emiliano Romano, right? Something like I think.
Yeah. So that's a few months away, I believe. I think that's like early summer. So we'll know then. You know, when that hits the track, if they're substantially better, then I think that will have resolved the issues. But it takes time for that stuff to shake out. But I would put my money on at least one win from Mercedes this year. Like, you know, last year, George getting his win snuck in right there at Interlagos.
I wonder too, like when you see some of these teams who are trying to. I mean, it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting look because there's some teams who are desperate to develop and you know, we were talking about McLaren before the show and how they're trying to revamp everything. What are they? Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess it's better to give birth than to resurrect the dead, right? That's the whole thing. Is just like we're starting over from the beginning. But what does that really mean for like the development of a team that just? What did they do to blow up kind of where they're at right now too?
Yeah. So the news from this last week is that they parted ways with their executive technical director. So the guy who was in charge of basically all the technical development of the car. And they're doing a complete restructure with like 3 technical directors over 3 different parts of development. And they said that these changes were already in motion from last season, but that the poor start that they've had in the first 2 races has just accelerated the timeline. And so, and then with those changes, they've also announced, and there's been rumors of lots of hiring going on, and engineers and aerodynamicists from Red Bull, from Aston. I think just today they announced that they pulled Aston Martin's one of their head aerodynamicists is coming over now, and we'll see how long it takes for all of those folks coming from the top teams. Ferrari also was one that was mentioned. How long will it take them to all come together and figure out a new direction for the car? I think that takes at least a year of development before you see the impact of all the new hires that they're making.
So this week, headed to Australia. You've been on Albert Park. You've driven a rental car. Did you jump it? Is that what you did? You
jump the car? Yeah. I definitely went over the speed limit, but not for too long because, man, they love their traffic cameras down there. Oh, boy. And I did get a ticket in Australia, but it wasn't on Albert Park. It was on the freeway.
Did it get sent to you? Or did you get pulled over?
No, it got sent to us, yeah.
That is
in the mail. It
hilarious.
got sent to my buddy who had the car rental was under his name. Yeah.
Yes.
But then we did the forensics, and I was the one driving when we got the ticket.
So they will not have the traffic cameras up at Albert Park this weekend. Is there anything in the top three that's going to change? As you said, some of the movement that you do on these teams and try to when you try to make your car better or faster, it happens in such a slow pace that how does this track work out for the top contenders in Red Bull, who have just been massive favorites and will continue to be massive favorites throughout the year? Where does the 1, 2, 3 look like on these teams, and how does this racetrack fare for some of these top guys?
Yeah, so the unique thing about Albert Park this year is they're adding another DRS zone, so there's going to be 4 total, and that's going to be a pretty healthy portion of the lap is going to be under DRS, and so with that, a lot of the teams are going to run like a heavier rear wing with more downforce because you have a more percentage of the lap that it's flipped up if you're under DRS, and so that will, for a portion of the lap, I think that'll help out a lot of these cars that have had issues with rear downforce, especially I think Mercedes, Lewis has talked about that they've just been lacking rear downforce. So that could help them out that they're able to run a heavier wing. But then that discrepancy of the advantage that you get from the DRS being open is also a factor that I think Red Bull has shown that they've had the most quote unquote efficient DRS system. And so I think that it'll probably be similar from the last 2 races with Red Bull being dominant, but there is that extra element that we haven't had in the first 2 races where I think DRS is going to be a lot more important. Like at Bahrain, the DRS was a non-factor. They shortened the first DRS section, and there's just not very much passing. It just wasn't effective in creating closer racing. That I think that Albert Park is going to be different. So
the closer racing is interesting you brought that up because I think there's already been criticism too that all of the regulation changes that have been made for these 2022, starting last year's regulations on these cars was so that they could get right next to each other or right behind each other, that there would be less dirty air, that there would be actually fights happening one right behind the other, and that's not necessarily been the case. What is the problem? What is the thing that they were aiming for, and why haven't they been able to achieve it, really?
Yeah, they were aiming to clean up the air so that the air coming off the car in front didn't have as much of a negative effect on the downforce of the car that's following it. And I think they did make some gains. There was more passing last year in 2022 than the prior few years by I think a pretty healthy margin. It was 20 or 30% more passing. But I still think that there's just issues following the cars in front. I mean, Max, he went from 15th to second? He didn't. Right. He was able to pass pretty easily. Yep. He had insane straight line speed at Saudi Arabia. But what the teams with the rule changes are still working the aerodynamics of the body to still gain that performance advantage that creates the dirty air off the back of the car. So I think it's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The regulation changes will take the 2 steps forward on more competitive racing, and then the 1 step back will be teams are moving the air such that it's really good for their car, and they don't care about the car behind them. And so I think the pendulum just swings a little bit on that. And I think really the only solution right now that in the short term that I think F1 has to create more competitive racing is more DRS zones, sadly.
What have we figured out from the rookies who are racing after 2 races? The first race you kind of had, a couple of DNFs, or at least I think Nick DeVries didn't finish the race. And then this last time out, I don't know if we're finding much out about these rookies. Logan Sargent's been pretty consistent, but what do we know about these new guys for this racetrack in their 3rd race of the calendar here?
I think that the rookies they're good. There's nobody out there running around like Latifi where they're just clearly a lot slower and getting lapped. I think that they're quick. There's been just a little bit of reliability issues or bad luck. Logan Sargent, if he hadn't had his lap time deleted, which we didn't really talk about that in the race recap for Saudi Arabia, but he had a really good time that would have put him into Q2 that got deleted because of a really stupid, I think, decision by the stewards about what was inbounds and out of bounds. And I don't understand how you can have out of bounds on a street circuit where it's walled in.
Right.
It's
well, that was one thing they asked him about.
Barrier.
He goes, there is no... He's like, I could not go off the track at that turn, or I don't know what they told him.
It's like he cut the very last turn and had a tire inside, I think, the line that designates where you go into pit road.
Yeah, but what about the 4 tires that have to be over a line anywhere else on the track?
That's where the rule was like everywhere else, it's all 4 tires have to be off, but for right there, it's 1. Like,
weird.
I don't know. It was dumb. So barring that, yeah, I think Logan would have had, at least a Q2 top 15 starting position and could have, he was already challenging for the points having started, I think, in 20th. So I think Logan is surprisingly consistent and I think is going to challenge Alex for top driver, which is not what I expected coming in.
So Stefano Domenicali, who's the F1 boss, suggested maybe some changes to the race weekend, which is getting rid of FP1, FP2, FP3. What are they going to get rid of? Is he talking about getting rid of all of free practice? Isn't that where most gains are made for teams to be able to dial stuff up? But here's the other thing that happens. You find out problems with cars. I think it's important. I mean, Red Bull had they had that issue with Max's car in qualifying, and I think they were, Christian Horner mentioned, he's like, if this is 2 or 3 laps later that this happens, that would have been in the race the next day that we had that issue. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, especially when you're unpacking everything from across the world and then hoping everything works. I think that FP1, FP2, FP3, I don't understand what you would replace it with.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be able to you got to get the car out there and get those reps, I feel like.
Everyone in the paddock reads that quote and just shakes their head because, like you said, it's a safety issue. I mean, it's not like you could just show up and race. I mean, you got to make sure that this car is put together and that there's not some issue. There's a reason that they do shakedown runs and you kind of ease your way into it before you go full out. And then, it's a reliability issue. Is there something broken from the shop that we didn't catch? I think that the spirit of what he was trying to say was, it's not entertaining to the fans, so why do we do it? I'm like, well, in every other sport, there's plenty of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that wouldn't necessarily be entertaining to most fans. Maybe to super diehards it would be, but we don't televise it, and we just choose to televise practice for F1. Now, I think that there's probably too much practice. I think 3 practice sessions is a bit much. And even in NASCAR, we had a similar setup, 3 practice sessions and then qualifying. And, kind of by the 3rd practice session, you're like, well, should we do a long run? Yeah, let's do a long run, see what happens. You're kind of you've learned what you need to learn and you have your setup.
So maybe, and because it is right before qualifying, I don't know, maybe the teams would disagree, but I get what you're saying. You go FP1 and FP2 and then maybe go straight to qualifying. But they've even talked about shortening the sessions maybe a little bit. Would that be something that could be an option then? Because I will tell you, I haven't watched a front to back FP session. The free practices are interesting. And you do like to see, I mean, honestly, the more interesting parts of those free practices is, okay, who's going to put one into the wall on accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be a red flag during the practice sessions, which is always bad, but at the same time you go, I just want to see which teams kind of have their stuff together. And it doesn't necessarily give you a total view, although it has this year. If you're Red Bull, you're at the top of the timing sheet seemingly for every one of these practices and qualifying and the races.
Yeah, I think that we need to decide, is the point of practice to entertain the fans, or is it to prepare the teams to create a then more entertaining race? And I think it's the latter. But you could shorten it. You could have fewer sessions, and then it kind of amps the temperature of man, these 60 minutes or these 120 minutes are super important. We better get it right. And if if you do put one in the wall, then, these guys basically have to rebuild the car, and then they go out and they qualify without any, previous runs on it. So I think that they can and will continue to play with the schedule for all the weekends. But I think, too, you got to think about the fan experience for the people that have flown to this race and they plan on 3 days of entertainment. If you condense that down to 2, you lose an entire day of, coming to these tracks where they're already having a hard time making money. I don't think that that's right to condense it from 3 to 2 days, but you could probably make the on-track time a little bit more high stakes without, compromising safety or competition.
So we had an interesting thing that happened over the weekend, which is this race. We've seen the Watkins-Glen race. I think Kimi Räikkönen getting out there on the Circuit of the Americas, certainly a track he knows well, a track that he's won at before in F1. But getting inside one of these stock cars and and racing is very different. Jenson Button had his go at it as well. We're seeing this crossover, and is America like jumping into? Are they able to kind of can F1 fans and NASCAR fans kind of can you be both? Like, can you convert NASCAR fans into F1 fans?
Yes, I think that it's easier to convert NASCAR into F1 than traditional F1 is to NASCAR. But
the racers really love the. Why is it that they
so different? Yeah,
isn't it crazy? Like all these guys love the NASCARs because they're just like, man, it's just like pure unbridled power at the rear of this car. Yeah, and you can't believe that cars are this close together going around the track at 190 miles an hour.
Yeah, Kimi had a quote this weekend that it just felt very old school. You know, he's like, I love that you can pass without needing DRS. Like, there's no tricks. It's just you're out there and it's all about, you know, trying to eke out performance out of these cars that aren't actually super well designed for road racing. They're heavy. They don't create a ton of downforce at low speed like F1 cars do. And so because they're kind of crappy for that reason, it makes good racing because everyone's just on top of each other, right? And, you know, Jensen had a post-race quote that was pretty good. And he just said, like, he got his butt handed to him in the first 10 laps because he wasn't being aggressive enough. And he said, I'd go into a corner and somebody be inside of me. And after he, you know, got some more used to it throughout the race, he was able to be competitive towards the end. But he didn't really love the fact that you basically used another car to help yourself slow down. You kind of just run into the back of them, and then you kind of move them out of the way a little bit, and then you get side by side and you bang doors, and that's just very unnatural to these guys. But it's a lot of fun, but it could get. I mean, I watched the end of the race, and they had to extend the race a bunch because the way the rules work in NASCAR is that if there's a caution flag in the last 2 laps or more, then they restart the race and it goes longer. So it was a bit of a circus because they'd go into the first corner and somebody would inevitably get spun out, and then you got to do it over again. So I don't really love that setup. But you know, Jensen, he said that he was getting heat exhaustion. He had to pit twice just because he needed like water and ice. Like, he was just getting...
The insides of those cars are no joke. Like,
it was like 120 degrees probably inside of that car, you know, for 3 hours.
And then you have your fire suit on, and then on... Those guys lose 10 pounds a race just in water.
Yeah, and F1 cars, or F1 drivers do as well, but it's more open air. And you know, but, yeah, Jensen, I think he had a better finish than Kimi because Kimi, he took a gamble, and they didn't pit, I think, with, like, 3 or 4 laps to go, but then he got spun out, and you know, he finished probably in the 20th. But I think it goes to show that like these F1 drivers can't just walk into another form of racing and just like wipe the floor with everybody.
But could Kimi be a champion at some point? Like, does he seem like he's got? Because that's a challenge for these guys, and I think they like the challenge. I mean, Fernando's you know, driven in other you know, formats before, and they like that. But they're also massively competitive, and I don't think they like the idea of some guy going, yeah, why don't you come over to our race, and we'll show you all how it's done, and then getting their butts kicked. Too.
Yeah, they don't love that. They want to come in and show that they're, you know, the best drivers in the world. Juan Pablo Montoya made the switch from F1 to NASCAR and had a pretty long NASCAR career and eked out a couple wins, but you know, at no point was he ever contending for a championship. And it's, I mean, these guys have been driving this type of racing since they were, you know, 6, and they haven't been driving go-karts, they've been driving ovals. Right. And the F1 guys have been driving go-karts. It's just really it's different.
Pretty wild stuff. What's up with Australia's version of the stock car of the NASCAR circuit is their V8 supercars. What's that about? Like, I don't know anything about that world. Why? Why is it so cool?
If I could wave a magic wand, I would turn NASCAR into Aussie's V8 supercars.
What's the deal with these cars?
They're more stock. Like, they're more like, okay, you're actually taking you know, a car from Ford or Chevy or
not just a Chevy, shell Holden, over the top of a frame
on top of like a custom built chassis. No, it's like, hey, we're going to convert this thing into a race car. And, you know, it's kind of the same reason as why those guys like going to NASCAR is it's just they slide around more. They don't have incredible traction or downforce. It's just like they're always on top of each other, lots of power. And it seems like there's always super competitive racing in V8 supercars. And Bathurst is, I think, the famous track in Australia. It's like a 1,000-kilometer race, and it's this track that goes up over a mountain and back down. And it's like, these guys race for 1,000 kilometers, and in the end, on the last lap, they're still like banging door to door to get to see who's going to win. And so I love V8 supercars, and I wish that NASCAR would. I mean, I think in the name of safety, like these guys will super speedway racing 200 miles an hour in a giant pack. You have to have a kart that's built differently in order to be safe than like a true stock car from an automotive manufacturer. So I see the reason. Okay,
let's go back to the F1 and Albert Park this weekend. Thoughts on a potential podium finish? Surprises that we could see this weekend, because that's all we want. We want some surprises. Maybe not just even on the podium, but more just like maybe you get some first points for some guys, or any places where we could be surprised this weekend, Dan.
I think Mercedes is better than they're claiming. I think that we saw in in Saudi Arabia, that they're faster than the Ferraris at a high-speed track. I think that they could get onto the podium with maybe this new mindset of like, past is past. We know we're coming to a new design philosophy here soon, and maybe they just kind of get the monkey off their back. So I'll be watching Mercedes. Ferrari, it was hard because Charles had to start further back. But even when the race kind of panned out, he wasn't, quick enough, I think, to get around the Mercedes
or the Aston Martins or
the
anybody.
Astons.
Yeah, it's like
maybe the surprise is Lance Stroll gets his first pole. I mean, he's had reliability issues. Not his first pole. What I'm saying is first podium of the season. And he's kind of had some reliability issues for the first bit, but he had a strong race in Bahrain. So maybe Lance gets on the podium.
Okay.
There.
Is that you trying to convince me what I should do with my fantasy F1?
Yeah.
I'm like such a rookie. I thought I did awesome last week. I don't really get it. I'm like, where am I losing points? I don't know where. And then like by the end of the race, you go, oh, look, I got some good points. And then they like re-add up points again. I don't even know how they score this thing, Dan. I don't know what I'm looking at.
It's all
like my
made
bracket.
up as they go.
It's like my NCAA bracket. There's no points showing up for anybody now the rest of the way. So
yeah.
I'm not even sure how it works, but my heavens, I get excited doing it. Okay, I think that there's going to be. I think you're going to see Red Bull still be pretty dominant. Like I don't know. I mean, just from race to race, from what I've learned over the last 6 years in F1, you just don't suddenly lose pace, and you don't just suddenly find a bunch of pace either.
Yeah.
And so I think that, and adding on top of it, the thing that I love about the idea of Red Bull having a little bit of an issue with their two racers wanting to actually, like, I mean, do you short Checo the chance to win a championship because you have a number one driver? You can't publicly say it. You can't pretend, but Checo's not an idiot either. I mean, he'll read between the lines. How do they balance that out between those two guys? Because I love the wheel-to-wheel racing stuff, but it could really blow up for these guys. We've seen it in the past with Red Bull.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're sweating bullets if you're Christian or if you're like the chief strategist. For everybody else, it's like I'm just going to do my job the best that I can for both guys, or for the driver that I support. If you're their engineer,
do they have totally different pits? Do they have totally different pit crews?
No, same crew.
They just have different engineers.
They have different engineers.
Do they have different strategists, or is there lead strategist? The engineer has to tell them what the strategist says to do.
That's a good question. I have to probably read into it, and it might change depending on the team.
To team, yeah.
But I remember, for a long time, was it last year or the year before, like in the middle of a race, they'd pan that camera to the woman who was the strategist for Red Bull. And she was always really good at her job and seemed like she was way ahead of Ferrari and whatnot. But I think that the head strategist is kind of then working with Christian to tell the engineers what to tell the drivers. And so, but for everybody else, it's just support the team the best that you can. I think that if I'm Christian, you have to start developing the plan of, okay, if Checo is in front of Max, but Max is approaching him and is faster, do you give the order?
Or the other way around.
Yeah, or the other way. And what is the driver going to say? What kind of collateral damage is that going to create?
They don't care what point of the race they're at. Either they go, I have better pace.
You're always faster than your teammate.
I have better pace. What is the plan? And you're like, do you though, really? It's like, wait, you're seeing the splits, or you go, what is the plan here? You hear these guys get mad, and they're like, move this guy out of the way. But is your team going to let you do it? Do you actually have that pace? And then there is a part where you go, you can't let him hold this guy up. You can't waste time in a battle amongst the teams. So it's just like when they tell a guy to defend, hey, you're not passing your teammate, you're defending against the guy behind you for you and your teammate, and mostly for your teammate. That's embarrassing a little bit, right? To be told you're going to be playing second fiddle and playing the wingman role and playing the martyr to help your guy win the race.
I think that whether they tell him or not, Sergio's just going to race.
Yes.
He's going to do whatever he wants.
Is this a good track for him too? I don't know what historically he's done.
I was just looking. I haven't seen a Red Bull win at Albert Park ever since the Sebastian Vettel days.
Oh, wow.
So I don't think it necessarily plays into either him or
they know that.
Max.
They know that. They're like I guarantee they have their eyes on that thing too.
Yeah,
like they're going. Mercedes has owned us at all these tracks for years, and we gotta show up and be that team now again.
Yeah, and Charles won last year. But I think that, man, as a fan, I hope that they say, like, hey, they play team orders, and that just ticks off Sergio, and it just makes him want it even more.
I can hear the radio message. I am faster. Why am I being held up? Like, just the drama with what was the fastest lap? What's the fastest lap time? It's just like, keep it at this. You're good. You're fine. And then they have Max nip him, and you go, there's some foul play going on here.
Yeah.
Max and his engineer fist bumping after the race, winking at each other, like, no good, man. But that's the stuff that I love. I love the drama. So that's what we're here for. So another weekend of drama out of Australia, and of course we'll have the breakdown as well for you on the podcast. So it's Mode Push. Dan, happy race week, man.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
Okay.
Put another shrimp on the Barbie, right?
Yeah. Every picture, every stupid poster from all these teams has like some version of them being upside down. It's like, very creative. Just have the toilet bowl going the other direction. You know, and then I don't think, come on.
Typical meme.
All right. For Dan Jimenez, I'm Alex Kirry. We'll see you next time on Mode Push. Thanks for being with us, everybody. Download, subscribe, comment, and share the podcast with anybody who you think is a blossoming F1 fan, because heaven knows we're getting more of those here in the States. So let's get to it. So for Dan, I'm Alex. We'll see you next time, everybody.